Okay. Um, hey, Dr. Cindy. Um, I hate this. I hate when people start their videos off with the I'm here, but I'm here. I'm shy, quiet as kept. I'm rather introverted, so I'm not going to be here that long. But I wanted to discuss Kavanaugh from a different perspective than what I'm seeing a lot of. People don't quite seem to understand that Kavanaugh's confirmation is a lot deeper than just his these things that they're throwing out at us. What do they call them? The shiny objects that they're throwing out at us to see. I mean, even to the extent of the shiniest object to date, which is his rampant, ravenous drunkardness and behavior and aggressiveness and his uh, sexual abuse of various people. Um, but there's something that is missing. If you notice, if you recall in the beginning of his appointment, and even to some extent now, there are people who are saying, um, there are people who are saying, oh, if Kavanaugh gets in, Roe versus Wade is going to go by the wayside. Women will not be in control of their bodies. They won't be able to get abortions. That's a whole nother subject. We'll get on that on another one of these things that I intend to get into. Um, but what is conspicuous by its absence is what is always there in the background that they want to keep in the background because they want you to think that it doesn't exist, even as its ugly head is being reared all over the place. And you've even got mainstream media talking about white supremacy. That was unheard of. What you even had Lindsay, white boy. You know what I mean? That's coming back. That used to be the case back in the early days, up until the civil rights movement, when it all of a sudden wasn't okay for white people to say white. But I don't want to digress. I want to stay within this framework of Kavanaugh's confirmation, which is probably still inevitable because there are a lot of different other reasons why that they are not focusing on as much. One of them is a court case, which once Kavanaugh has been installed, he will be seated to make a determination and a deciding vote on a case which would allow, or which would now disallow, states to file charges and to indict individuals on cases that have already been adjudicated federally. Manafort comes to mind. He comes to mind. Trump comes to mind. So if he wanted to, say, pardon someone on a state charge, he could then do that. Or in his own case, things that he's going to be in, that he is in trouble for, and potentially he won't be in trouble. I mean, he won't be able to be charged for those same things in his home state of New York, where most of that stuff has gone on. That's one thing. But for the rest, I'm going to put on my lens. Has anybody heard of Dred Scott? Dred Scott is a court case which held that no African, no person, these are the words of one of the holdings in that court case, that no person of African descent can ever be a citizen of the United States. That's what Dred Scott said. Okay? Now, what ended up happening a little later on in the 14th Amendment said, all the little workings and whatnot, things started kicking off, and eventually 14th Amendment rolled around and said that every American naturalized and born in this country, every person born and or naturalized in this country is a citizen. Okay. Now, I want you to keep that in mind because that's really important for what's coming next. They have been talking about immigration, illegal immigration. And, of course, we are not thinking about it in terms of ourselves because they show us a picture of brown people and say that they are the people who we're aiming at in terms of immigration, illegal, and now in this case, legal immigration, because they're doing things with regard to that too. Keep that in mind. Now, within that framework, Dred Scott decision overturned with the 14th Amendment. Okay. There is something called a constitutional convention. They don't convene them all the time. But when they are convened, that means it's like opening up the book of life. In this case, they're opening up the Constitution, and all bets are off. You better know this. You better look it up. Okay? They have been working toward opening up a constitutional convention on the pretext of an amendment to balance the budget. You don't need an amendment to balance the damn budget. Clinton did it. Okay? And he did it without an amendment. And it's done generally when Democrats are in office. It's not done when Republicans are in office, because where Democrats tax and spend, Republicans borrow and spend. That's the difference economically between the two parties, just in case you wanted to know. But I digress. Anyway. Once they open up this constitutional convention, they can go in and make changes to any amendment to the Constitution. And just as an aside, the Libertarian Party and the people who call themselves the constitutionalists, the purists, the ones who believe in the Constitution itself and not all of these pesky bills of rights up after the 14th Amendment. Do bear in mind that once that constitutional convention is open, they can go in and put in whatever they want. And you know who is in charge. And if it had to go to the Supreme Court, of which our boy Kavanaugh would be confirmed, those changes would be ratified. Therefore, if on some, we can say unlikely possibility that, or slight, that this could never happen. Just like they would never have burnt up all the Jews, or the millions of Jews in Germany, because they had that crazy man in there, just like we have a crazy man in our presidency. Just think for a moment, if they decided to overturn the 14th Amendment and decide, for whatever reason, that Africans, people of African descent, can never be citizens of the United States. That would make us illegal immigrants or something. It certainly wouldn't make us citizens anymore. It would make us something. Maybe it would make us legal immigrants, but we know what they're doing to us there. And you want to keep in mind also, bear in mind also, that Bannon and that other fella, Spencer, who's the guy that's in the White House with him right now? whoever he is, they are pushing to have nationality put into the 2020 census. Ironically, there are no African American descendants of the enslavement who have a nationality short of an entire continent. But DNA being what it is, and I'm 32% British, don't ask how. We already know I'm a descendant of the enslavement, okay? They might decide to send my ass to Britain. I ain't never been there. Okay? Now, I'm just kidding, and I digress on that. But I just want you to understand the seriousness of the things that are done in background. I was just talking to another friend of mine who, as we were discussing things, and they always inevitably, every time I talk to anybody about anything, it always inevitably ends up being about race and white supremacy and things like that. And wait a minute, what is this? I'm starting to read some of the things. Hi, Pat. Hi, Hey, Romano. How you doing? I don't know how to pronounce your name. Finn. I'll say Finn. I hope I'm saying it correctly. Hey, Rebecca. Hi, Donald. Hey, Vanessa. Eddie. Hey, Eddie. Old friend, old friends. Levette. Oh my goodness. Hi, everybody. How are you? Anyway, you know, we were talking about, you know what? I started looking at the people who were on here or who were on here, and I got a little bit off topic. But anyway, getting back to Kavanaugh and his appointment. There, like I said, there are a whole lot of ramifications. Oh, this is what I was getting ready to say. Back in the day, in the beginning of the civil rights movement, back in the 70s, when I was looking for jobs and getting jobs, yeah, I was grown then too. You had to have a picture before. I remember the first job that I got at Fidelity Bank, I had to have a picture taken to put on my application. But after the civil rights movement, after the enactment of the equal employment opportunity requirements for employers, equivalent experience used to be just as good as a college education, because there were many black people in positions with the experience and no college degree. So they were passed over for jobs just all the time. I mean, but now, and we can thank Clarence Thomas for that, because he was the head of the EEOC before he, as one of his positions before he ultimately was confirmed. But anyway, because during Reagan's time, and while we were kind of asleep in the post-racial colorblind era, things like college degree preferred, or you need a college degree, that you couldn't just you couldn't just require that. You had to also allow for equivalent experience. But if you notice now in the 21st century, that is gone. And there are a lot of other, well, we already know the Voting Rights Act was decimated. There are a lot of things that are happening. Our civil rights are being whittled away. If Kavanaugh gets in there, you can best believe that some serious crap on that front is going to happen. Not the least of which was when I talked about that possibility of screwing around with us as people who are natural born citizens of this country. Keep in mind that MAGA means make it white again. So it is not that far-fetched. And let me bring to you a subject which I did a little research on, and I know other people may know about this. the Dominican Republic did pretty much the same thing to their citizens of Haitian descent who were born and were never in Haiti. In 2013, they rescinded citizenship for a whole lot. I would say millions, but I don't want to sound like Trump, for a whole lot of Haitian people who spoke the Dominican language. They didn't speak Haitian. They never went to Haiti. They were not born in Haiti. And they took it all the way back to 1929, which meant that if you were born from 1929 till this present day, you were not a citizen anymore. Now, anybody born in 1929 is probably dead by now. So that effectively created an entire group of people who were no longer citizens now. So you think that can't happen? It can happen. And you might say, well, that's the Dominican Republic. That ain't the United States of America. Maybe you forgetting who is in that White House right now. Mr. MAGA himself. So I just want you to keep those other things in mind while you're talking about Me Too. And me too. Trust me. I don't think that many women in this country and in the world who don't share that hashtag. I don't think there are too many. I think the only difference is the level and of abuse and the age when it occurred. So that's pretty much what I wanted to say. I wanted you to just think about it. Yeah, he's a lech. He's a beast. He should not be in there for a variety of reasons. But we got to keep our eyes on the fact that once his butt is in there, they are going to move to erode just about every... Look who we got in there. I mean, look who's there. Look at Lindsay. Clutch the pearls. Okay, look at Lindsay. Lindsey Graham is a Strom Thurmond Beauregard Sessions alumna. Okay? He is one of them. He is a George Wallace Bull Connor guy. Okay? So let's and the majority of them who were in the Democratic Party before are now in the Republican Party now. So just bear this stuff in mind and understand that it's not just about because he sexually abused Dr. Rose. It's because and it's not just because of Roe versus Wade. All right? I mean, yeah. We don't want white men controlling our bodies, especially black women, because it wasn't until the 1960s that they stopped controlling our bodies. Okay? And it had nothing to do with Roe versus Wade and abortion. It had everything to do with them coming in the house and yanking our asses out and just doing what they wanted to do with us. And I'm talking about in the 50s. One of the reasons why Rosa Parks did what she did, it wasn't because she was tired. She was on that bus because buses were some of the worst places for African American descendants of the enslavement, for the women who were the ones who were on those buses going to work. It was some of the worst places ever for these women to be because they could be abused at will.
The sandwich right here, baby.
Thank you, honey. They could be abused at will. They could be pulled off the buses and beat to a pulp. They could be pulled into places and raped. Read that book, Dark End of the Street. You'll get an entirely different perspective. It's called The Dark End of the Street. I believe it is. I might have to look that up and get back on here and say something about that. But the thing is, you'll get an entirely new perspective of Rosa Parks. But again, I digress. That's why I don't get on this thing that often, because I get to talking about stuff and one thing leads to another, and next thing you know, I am just like all over the place on this stuff. But I think at the end of the day, it all comes back to Mr. Kavanaugh and his appointment to the court and the things that he will do. And we already know which side he's on because he pretty much said it in his tirade that he is extremely partisan and an extremist. I mean, if I didn't know better, I thought I was looking at Alex Jones. And this is the guy that they want to put on the Supreme Court. Yeah. A whole lot of stuff. Oh, and I forgot that one other thing too. This doesn't have anything to do with race, but it has everything to do with the privilege and white supremacy. You know, our boy in the White House is so crooked. He wants to make sure that he gets a man in there because everything he does for himself. And as soon as he found out that Kavanaugh feels the way he feels, all of a sudden, since his little bills and stuff were paid, he feels like a sitting president should not be investigated, indicted, subpoenaed, anything. He thinks you're supposed to just leave a sitting president in his position as long as he's in there. And even though there may be clouds over his head, ironically, there's so many clouds over this bastard's head, but that he feels like the president is supposed to have the ability to stay president even with all of the clouds over his head. So that's the overarching reason why he's there for, as far as Trump is concerned. But like I said, we have to be diligent. We have to keep our eyes open and don't get snowed in by these other things that are not necessarily out there because they're not putting them out there. I'm waiting for that Princeton professor, Eddie Glock, I think his name is. I'm waiting for someone to say something about Dred Scott and about immigration and about the tie-in between the Constitutional Convention and how they will be able to make changes to amendments and how they'll be able to change our very lives. They can, when they say things like this appointment is going to affect the lives of people for generations, it may not necessarily, well, let's see. Okay, I'm 64. I'll be 65 in December. Okay, I got about another good, if I'm so blessed, I got another 25, maybe 30 years on this earth. But my children and my grandchildren have to live here. They have to be here. I'll be gone and that'll be it. But my children and their children and their children will have to live in this world such that it is becoming. And this is what makes me get out here and say the stuff that I say. Because I'm concerned about them. And you should be too. You should be concerned about yours. And you should speak up and speak out. And every time you see it, don't just say, well, it could have been. No, if it is, it is. See it and say it and wear your lenses too. Okay, I'm out because I'll end up talking about stuff that don't relate to Kavanaugh, and maybe I'll get on here again. I'm not sure. The doctor was in. Bye-bye.